This gravely violates the international law and the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, to which China is also a signatory. The action by China has been directly threatening peace, stability, and maritime security and safety and freedom of navigation and aviation in the East Sea. Vietnam always wants peace and friendship. We have exercised utmost restraint, showed every gesture of goodwill, and exhausted all dialogue channels to communicate with Chinese authorities of different levels by expressing protest and demanding China to immediately withdraw its drilling rig and its escorting vessels from the Vietnamese waters, to ask China to observe the 1982 UNCLOS. However, up to now, China not only failed to respond to Vietnam's legitimate demand. On the contrary, it has been slandering and blaming Vietnam while continuing to use force and escalate its increasingly dangerous and serious acts of intimidation and violence. The entire Vietnamese nation have been protesting against China's wrongdoings. In various localities of the country, people have spontaneously launched demonstrations, and some people have become restive and violated the law. The Vietnamese government has timely contained the acts of law infringement and strictly punished law violators. As a result, the situation have become totally stable. Enterprises, business, and production have become back to normal. Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely thank ASEAN countries and friends in the world for their sympathy and support to Vietnam's protection of national sovereignty and legitimate interest in conformity with the international law. The solidarity and cooperation of the international community, which we hope to continue to receive, and this is essential for preventing acts of international law violation. We hope that you and the Forum will continue to make positive contribution to the building of an Asia-Pacific region of peace, stability, cooperation, and prosperous development. On behalf of the Vietnamese government, may I wish you all good health, happiness, and success. May the conference be crowned with success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I can only repeat what I said in my introductory remarks. The World Economic Forum is a neutral organization and we don't take stands. But I appeal on behalf of the World Economic Forum to all parties to revert to discussions and dialogue to resolve the situation, which has the potential to create a situation we all do not want to have if we look at our future economically and politically. We are living in a global world. We need global partnerships. We need global peace. Thank you. And I may now ask Your Excellency, the Vice President of Myanmar, to address us. And Mr. Vice President, do you remember we were last year, we hold our meeting in your capital, and I'm pleased to have you back here among us.
His Excellency President Benigno Aquino III, His Excellency President Cicelo Bamban Yudhoyono, His Excellency Prime Minister Nguyen, Professor Klaus Schwartz, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a great honor for me to participate in this plenary session. The economic developments in many emerging countries may have various on social and environmental areas. Some of these impacts are visible. However, some are not. The adverse impact such as mass relocation of people due to the development of mega projects, point source environmental impact due to the waste coming out of factories, etc., could be highly visible. However, widening rural and urban gap, increases inequity between haves and have-nots, non-point source environmental impacts, having further unexpected environmental consequences, etc., could not be visible. Hence, after experiencing the undesirable consequences of these visible and non-visible impacts that came along with the economic development, more and more emerging countries are convinced of the concept of sustainable development to achieve the balanced development in economic, social, and environmental spheres. Although they are convinced of the sustainable development concept, it is easier said than done for the effective implementation. With the rapid economic growth, environmental problems escalate and inequities are being developed, having adverse impacts on social development, and the important social capital is depleted to a great extent in many emerging countries. Being a latecomer, Myanmar has a unique opportunity to learn the lessons learned by many other countries. The statistical analysis in some ASEAN countries revealed the positive relationships between economic growth, Gini coefficients, and poverty headcount ratios, showing the evidence of increased economic growth followed by increased inequity, which can be improved to the great extent through poverty reduction. Hence, a nation's effective poverty reduction strategy could play an important role in reducing the level of inequity while experiencing the economic growth. Since Myanmar started opening up in 2011, a great emphasis had been made on the comprehensive rural development and poverty reduction with the view not only to narrow the rural and urban gap, but also to narrow the gap of inequity by geographical areas, by classes of society in different income strata, and by gender. Various measures are being taken for the development of hard and soft connectivity to narrow the gaps. As a result, Myanmar had reduced the poverty rate from 32 to 26% in 2010, and it has been trying to reduce the poverty rate to 16% by 2015. However, challenges are everywhere. Since it is a long-term process, long-term and a sustained political commitment is required. We are thankful to our civil societies inside and outside the country, development partners, the private sector, and the friends of Myanmar that have been working along with us, hand in hand together, despite all these challenges. Some countries in the region have reached a certain level of development. However, they will still be in the middle income strip as long as they cannot address the gap of inequity. In order to overcome these challenges in restoring the equity, various structural changes are required, and some changes may be politically costly. Therefore, it is difficult and delicate. However, Dr. Martin Luther King, if you cannot fly, then run. If you cannot run, then walk. If you cannot walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Hence, we are indeed moving forward in every step for the inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development. It's a long way to go. However, we are moving forward. I am confident that This section will bring inspiration to understand the importance of promoting growth with sustainable development. I look forward to work closely with all interested stakeholders in shaping the future development of our country, Union of Myanmar. Thank you all.
This brings us to the conclusion of this official opening session. But when the World Economic Forum published its global risk report, as it does every year, this year, the number one global risk, which was identified by a network of over 1,000 experts, was the lack of social inclusion. Not only in the developing world, but also in the developed world. And I think we are witnesses a kind of tipping point where we have to change, and it was confirmed by all four of our distinguished speakers. We have to change the way how we run our economies. We have to remain, as it was said, very entrepreneurial on the one hand, but we have to create also the conditions to make sure that everybody is included into the progress, which means economic development without social progress is not sustainable. And social progress without economic development is not possible. I think that's, in one magic sentence, I think that's a challenge we have in front of us all, not only in those four countries which are characterized by fast economic growth, but all over the world. And we all hope for a peaceful world. Now, speaking about entrepreneurship, it was also mentioned that medium-sized, large and medium-sized enterprises, entrepreneurial enterprises, are very crucial to drive the economy. And in this respect, I would like to ask for a very short ceremony my colleague David Eichmann to take the floor. But before doing so, coming back to this question of optimism and pessimism, I think we all, after those four speeches, are very optimistic about the future of this region. And I would say the question, and I take a metaphor which was used in the presentation, the question is not so much whether the glass is half full or half empty. I think what we have seen is the fact that the glass is growing and growing and growing fast. So even if it's half empty still, but still we have more water in the bottle, and which means we have more economic progress which is ahead of us. May I now ask first all of you to thank our panelists.
Good afternoon. Today, the Economic Forum is recognizing some of East Asia's most influential high-growth companies that are capitalizing on the growing ASEAN economies and looking towards the global horizon. These companies are innovators and market shapers, and the Forum would like to award their potential for impact in the region and beyond. 10 of the selected global growth companies from the ASEAN region are in Manila today. They represent economic dynamism and highlight the entrepreneurial and innovative spirit that East Asia needs to continue on its path to greater prosperity, integration, and influence. I am thrilled to introduce the East Asian Global Growth Company Honorees 2014. Please join me in welcoming and honoring on stage Akleda Bank, One Arthur Life, Myan Shipi Tractors, Capital Diamond Star Group, Manila Water Company, AA Corporation, Teijide, VNG Corporation, Tianmin Group, and Minpu Seafood. We're going to take a picture with the heads of state, and then we'll bring this session to a close. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings our opening plenary to a close.
Just witnessed the opening plenary of the World Economic Forum with a panel of the different heads of state as well as several executive officials. Namely, that was of course President Benigno Aquino III and President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, President of Indonesia. That was also the Prime Minister of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, His Excellency Nguyen Dung, and of course Vice President Nyan Tun of the Republic of the Union of Myanmar. And of course they were joined by Professor Klaus Schwab, who was a founder of the
And very interesting, JC, is the commonality of their messaging towards the public in that opening of the plenary session. Both of all of their common messages delve upon participatory public as the key towards integration and progress, and the pursuit of large-scale reforms with regard to government or with every aspect of governance. We are joined here now by our senior correspondent and writer, Mr. Freddy Abando.
Well, thank you very much, JJ, and of course JC. You know, if you look at the speech of the president, it was one great opportunity for the president to underline the gains of the administration and the country over the past 3 years. Of course, the president running on an agenda of good governance, which has also raised the Philippines' rankings in the World Economic Forum over the past 3 years. And of course, the president was very emphatic about this campaign, demonstrated by his statement regarding going grafters in government and citing former President Arroyo as one of those that have really been the focus of this attention, given the fact that in the past administration, scams and scandals was a problem. And we have seen that because of these efforts, the confidence of the international community has risen over the past 3 years. And this is, of course, echoed by the rankings that we have seen in the World Economic Forum on 5 categories. One of them is good governance. You talk about information technology, you talk about tourism, you talk about trade facilitation, and of course the ease of doing business, wherein we took a giant leap as recorded by the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank. So many good news, and that's, I guess, the reason why a lot of the delegates, 600 of them, are here in Manila to see for themselves exactly how the changes have taken place. And it's not just the government earning the respect of our people, but the international community. And there's so much reason for our people to hope that government is doing its job. And this was demonstrated, of course, by the statement also of the president about social protection programs for the conditional cash transfer program, which benefits about 4.3 million people. And now this year, because of the gains in collection in sin tax reforms, the government, through PhilHealth, is going to cover 14.5 million families, poor families. And you know, if healthcare was a major concern before, that you have our poor or marginalized sectors, they go to a government hospital and they find themselves not getting the attention they deserve. Now, no, talagang it's open for them.
Well, we understand, and we would like to talk more about the developments that Philippines can show as a sign of readiness towards ASEAN integration. Meanwhile, let's watch the interview of Mr. Abando with the President of the World Bank.
A pleasant day. This Lizardo. Welcome to our continuing coverage of the World Economic Forum, and we're pleased today to have our very exclusive interview with Ms. Rachel Kite, the Group Vice President for Climate Change for the World Bank, and is also a special envoy. Welcome, Rachel, to the Philippines. How do you find your experience being here in Manila?
Well, it's great to be back in Manila. It's been a few years, and the city's getting bigger and busier. So it's great to be back, and I've also had a chance to travel around the country a little bit. So a very warm welcome.
Well, since we're talking about climate change, and last year, Haiyan, or Typhoon Yolanda, as we call it here in the Philippines, has been a major impact in terms of disaster. And if you look at the magnitude of the devastation, it's so tremendous that the World Bank itself was the first to commit in the reconstruction process. So how do you see climate change in the future in this country in relation to development from where we are, especially in the countryside?
Yeah, I think that like the Philippines, and it's not alone, but it's one of the countries that is going to be the most affected by virtue of your geography alone. The intensity of extreme weather events and the frequency of those extreme weather events precipitated by climate change means that it's no longer isolated incidents, it's no longer just one part of the country that's going to be affected. This is now something that has to be programmed into the entire national development strategy going forward, and that's been the response of the government. And so while we were very pleased to be able to put $500 million at the disposal of the government very soon after Haiyan hit, and then another $500 million for community-driven development thereafter, what we're now doing is discussing with the government how to build a national financial resilience for the Philippines. Development will be more expensive, building back better, and building resilience into the infrastructure so that when the next storm hits, it doesn't have such an extreme impact. That's going to cost more. Local governments have to be financially resilient, can invest in their agriculture system so that they're not quite so vulnerable. And then households have to be resilient. People need to be able to have the means to be able to bounce back quicker. All of that's going to cost money, but I think the international community is ready to help. And so is the private sector, and so that's the conversation that's going on here, is how can we respond to a call from the Philippine government to really help the Philippines build its entire resilience, so that given that it's geographically sort of in the wrong place at the wrong time, how can the Philippines still grow, still provide jobs, still be competitive, still be functioning?
We've seen, when you talk about typhoons, it's a regular routine. And if you're talking about the threat getting worse over the next few years and trying to build resiliency, and if you look at Haiyan as the basis for determining how government should respond in the future, do you think the current structure of government is sufficient enough to cope with what may come yet in the future, using Haiyan as a model for that?
So it's a very good question, and we've seen other countries respond to disasters, and we're able to bring lessons learned from Peru and from Haiti and from Indonesia and from New Zealand and from Japan to the Philippines, so that the Philippines can see how others have done it. But the challenges are the same in every country. How do you get central government, local government and communities all lined up and have a flow of funding and a flow of technical assistance that moves all the way up and down? How can you speed up and scale up the response? So housing is a huge issue for the people in Tacloban and the areas around that. So how do you build back to resilient standards, but do that in a quick way? And one of the things that we've learned from Indonesia and elsewhere is that actually making the materials and the funding available to the community, and then having the community build their own houses, just providing support and technical assistance on the grade to which those houses must be built and where they need to be built, can save money and get things moving in a much more quicker way. So there is a lot of learning around the world, and helping the Philippines build that into their ability to respond the next time is, I think, one of the roles that we think we can play.
You speak about Ray, the recovery assistance for Yolanda. It's been 6 months, and if the World Bank has to review what has been going on, are we on target in terms of post-disaster management, in terms of how government is having synergies with local government and with a lot of help from the country's development partners like the World Bank and private corporations?
Well, I think I was able to visit the region earlier this week and was able to see with my own eyes what's working and what's not working quickly enough.
What's working quickly?
I think there's lots of private initiatives that are springing up. I think there are communities where they have very specific development plans in place, and the mayors know exactly what they need to do. I think getting the funds down that everybody is able to experience that kind of success remains a challenge. In my opinion, is not the most important opinion. The opinion is the government satisfied with its own performance, and are the people who are affected satisfied with the way in which they're being able to get back? Well, I think our role is as a technical. We're there to provide technical advice, and we're there to provide finance, and that only works when communities and government are all thinking the same thing and all on the same page. And I think that is there, but there are all kinds of obstacles to making sure that money flows easily. So now that we're out of the immediate relief phase in most cases, and now we can really think about reconstruction, the question is, does everybody have the same vision for building back a community that will be stronger, that will be more economically dynamic, where we have a chance not just to replace irrigation systems, but to build an irrigation system that will withstand the next storm. And that's a conversation which has to have everybody involved in it, and everybody has to feel an ownership of that. And I think again we can bring that kind of advice to the table.
When you speak about reconstruction or rehabilitation, it cannot be a piecemeal thing where one particular group like the national government does its thing and local governments will do its thing. So there has to be some convergence in which conflicts of personality should not be an issue. Is that a problem? Conflict among personalities in national and local government?
I think that's a challenge in every country in the world. We see this every time. So getting central government and local government lined up, it's like a relay, so the baton is handed over from one to the other easily, is something that takes time and attention. And then, of course, we're talking about every sector of the economy. We're talking about the resilience of the agriculture sector, the resilience of housing, the resilience of infrastructure, the resilience of the fishing industry, the resilience of small, medium-sized enterprises in the economic centres. That requires every department of government to fully own the vision of what that building back better looks like. And that's a role for central government, and I think putting somebody in charge. Your job is to coordinate all of this and cutting through the bureaucratic barriers and changing the rules. If they have to be changed, becomes very important. And if you look at countries that do this well, they've found a way to cut through the bureaucracy so that they can move very quickly in the immediate aftermath of a disaster.
If you look at Aceh, and at the same time Haiti, how long did it take them really to recover and see that, the economy is, is alive again, and people are, rising from the ruins and having a whole new life and not threatened by another calamity that will affect them?
Well, they're in some respects comparable, in some respects not. One thing that we know is that the social bonds within the community, the strength of those social bonds, will determine how quickly a community bounces back.
And that has been the interview of Mr. Freddy Abando with the World Bank Vice President and Special Envoy for Climate Change, Rachel Kite. Several of the points discussed were on climate change. So this was really about sustainable development and ensuring our resiliency as a nation.
Well, going with the interview and just looking at the other elements to that, after that interview there was a meeting with the Cabinet Cluster on Climate Change, and the emphasis being put forward by the World Bank is that there is a need for the creation of a national resiliency fund which is needed to ensure that more resources are spent to prevention, rather than response later on. And we find that, and as mentioned by Secretary Pahe in the meeting with the World Bank, is that the government is about to launch an initiative called as the Climate Mitigation Adaptation Fund. Hopefully that may be done in about 2 weeks. I really don't know how. It will be presented to the President. It has been President Aquino's single purpose to fight corruption and promote transparency in government. This has resulted in a high grade in good governance, and what better venue to showcase good governance than the World Economic Forum of 2014. Sweden Velado tells us more.
Behind a good leadership is good governance. It is the avenue to a more progressive economy and developed nation. Good governance advocates transparency, encourages accountability, and promotes efficiency through development of strategies for quick and effective processes in various administrative institutions.
With the resolve to effect transformational change and fulfill the promise I made in my campaign, which said, kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap. And translated, where there is no corruption, there will be no poverty.
President Aquino continues to fulfill his campaign promise by implementing programs that conform to good governance. To improve public access and delivery, transactions with government agencies in terms of processing applications for birth certificates, passports, police clearances, and tax filing were upgraded by making it available online. This kind of service reduces face-to-face transactions that usually cause corruption on some agencies because of fixers. Another breakthrough in the Aquino administration is a platform which gathers government data that could be useful for the public. It is called the Open Data Philippines. By accessing www.data.gov.ph, the internet user would be directed to infographics that present visuals such as demographic data on public school enrollment per year level, traffic visualization to find out easiest and fastest route to get to your destination, and a budget graph that informs the public where their taxes go and how the budget is appropriated by different government departments.
Opening data is about making statistics understandable through the use of reader-friendly visualizations. Ultimately, opening data is more than just making columns and rows of figures for viewing. It is about empowering the people through information.
Not only that, when Typhoon Yolanda ravaged the Philippines, the government created an online information portal called Faith Website, which stands for Foreign Aid Transparency Hub. It presents foreign pledges amounting to 34 billion pesos, where 11 billion pesos is cash and 22 billion pesos is non-cash. Meanwhile, constant efforts of the government to fight corruption is also part of promoting good governance. In fact, according to Worldwide Governance Indicators or WGI, the Philippines in 2012 ranked 33rd in its efforts to combat corruption. In terms of government effectiveness, the country ranked higher in 2012 at 58, coming from 54 in 2009. With good governance, a bright future awaits our country. In 2014, the Philippines is projected to be the strongest performing Southeast Asian economy with more than 6.5% GDP growth.
What ties all these initiatives together is the efficiency and the persistence which we have pursued them. Our determination to let Filipinos truly reap the tangible benefits of good governance. Moving forward, this will continue to characterize our efforts. This will allow us to reach greater heights and move from success to success as we make good governance the norm.
For People's Television, this is Sweden Velado.
Thank you very much, Sweden Velado.